Hello, you are on Ruslan Bailov's channel. The fighting continues, and we continue to study the situation on the Ukrainian front. So friends, let's turn our heads away from politics and move to the battlefield overview. Here we have both alarming news and positive developments. And right away, let me clarify. Alarming does not mean bad. It just means alarming. So let's start with that. Do you remember Sursky saying that the armed forces of Ukraine would soon launch another offensive? And we analyzed with you that one of the potential targets could be the Bryansk region. Well, at the moment, a certain buildup of forces is being recorded there, right next to the border. Here, look, the village of Seredina Buda is located right at the border. Yesterday, a concentration of Ukrainian forces was spotted there, and 2 airstrikes were carried out. But perhaps the most significant event was that yesterday a Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group was discovered directly inside the Bryansk region. 6 fully armed and equipped Ukrainian fighters. They also carried explosives with them. And you know, it would still be one thing if they had been spotted somewhere near the border, say 5 or 7 kilometers deep. That would still be understandable. But do you know where they were actually found? Here, in the vicinity of the village of Apaja, Komarichi district of the Bryansk region. Let's even measure how far that is from the border. Look, about 45 kilometers. They were found and wiped out. Quite harshly, in fact. Interestingly, they were detained near this village, but their ultimate target was, of course, the urban-type settlement of Komarichi. More precisely, not the settlement itself, but the railway line running through it. Meaning they did not reach their final target by about 10 kilometers. What does this tell us? Both the build-up of Ukrainian forces on the Bryansk border and the deep penetration of such a large sabotage group into the region suggest that neither Sursky nor Zelensky have abandoned their plans to move into another Russian region. They were completely driven out of Kursk. And no matter what fairy tales Sursky tells about holding something there, they control nothing, 0 square kilometers. And now they are trying to probe and scout the situation in Bryansk. By the way, 3 of those 6 fighters were not eliminated, but taken prisoner, including the commander of that sabotage group. So I think the Russian special services will learn a lot of interesting things from them. For Russia, there is one clear conclusion. Remain maximally vigilant, do not miss a potential strike if it comes, and deliver a strong response right at the border. To prevent a repeat of the situation we saw a year ago in the Kursk region. Well, now let's turn to Russian advances at the front. But before moving on, as always, I want to sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel if you watch my videos regularly, but are not yet subscribed. Your subscription helps the channel grow. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. Now let's go from north to south. We've covered the Bryansk sector. Let's move to the Sumy region. Things are stable here, not only for us, but also for the Ukrainian armed forces. When was the last time you heard of any Ukrainian successes in the Sumy region? I think it's been quite a while. They are bogged down here as well. The last thing they attempted was an assault column attack on the village of Konstantinovka. This is the last village before the border with the Kursk region, and for Russia it is extremely important to hold it. Because if the Ukrainians capture it, the next attack will already be in Kursk, not in Sumy, and that scenario, of course, must be avoided. The last attack was repelled. The Ukrainians lost 3 APCs and 1 tank, and they retreated back to Kondratovka. But without a doubt, they will continue their attacks. That's clear, because for Zelensky, this is a cherished goal, to re-enter the Kursk region. As for Russian advances, the only place where progress is being made in Sumy, and even then slowly, is in Yunakovka. Over the last day, they advanced 200 meters toward the southern part of the village. And that's basically it. Much more dynamic developments are happening in the Kharkov region. Here, the maps have not been updated yet, but Russian forces launched an attack on the left bank part of Kupiansk. They managed to break through and enter the city. Not only enter, but even reach the center of the left bank, Kupiansk. The attack came from this side, from Sinkovka, reaching this far. Footage came in from this very sector, showing fighting in central left bank Kupiansk. Should we expect that Kupiansk will fall tomorrow or the day after? Of course not. If a similar breakthrough had reached the center of the right bank part of the city, then yes, Kupiansk would really be on the verge of falling. But the problem with the left bank is that it lies in low ground, below the right bank. If you don't control the right bank, you cannot hold the left for long. You'll be shelled endlessly. Russian forces already reached central left bank Kupiansk last autumn, and what happened? They had to withdraw. Of course, the situation now is different. You can see from the map that Kupiansk is in a semi-encirclement. The right bank is partially blocked, so this attack could be more successful than last year's and may lead to taking the city. We'll see. It would be quite remarkable if, after all this time talking about Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, and Konstantinovka, the first major city to fall turned out to be Kupiansk. Moving on, also in Kharkov region, the Borovoy sector has noticeably intensified. Recently, the village of Zeleny Gai was taken under control. Now Russian troops are right at the approaches to Borovskaya Andreevka. They haven't yet entered the village itself, but they're at the outskirts. The village is important because after it, there is essentially a direct road to Borovaya. And Borovaya itself is crucial. Once it falls, everything north of it collapses for the Ukrainians, and the south also comes under heavy strain. That's why until recently they kept elite units here, including Azov. Now they weakened this sector, sending those forces toward Dobropol. So there is a real chance things will start moving here soon. Further on, at the Lyman sector there is progress in Zareknoye, with footage confirming it. From the Seversk front, we also received confirmation from the Ukrainian side that Russian forces made good progress in the Bryansk forest. They advanced 1 kilometer in Vyemka and also destroyed several vehicles coming from Seversk as reinforcements. Still, this front is more static compared to the northern one, so even these advances don't mean much yet. To pose a real threat to Seversk from the south, Russia would need to take not only Vyemka, but also preferably Kuzmovka and Zvanovka. Then yes, the threat becomes real, but for now even Vyemka has not been fully taken. Another advance happened near Poltavka. Russian troops moved 1.5 kilometers toward Shakovo. In this way, the Russian army is trying to increase pressure on the Dobropoli sector from the east. Let's see what comes of it. And in the Dobropol sector itself, footage has appeared of a Russian attack north of Zolotaye Kolodedzi. Although it is not yet marked on the map, the data is reliable, and according to it, Russian troops are encircling Zolotaye Kolodedzi from two sides. Now moving to the Konstantinovka direction, where reports are coming in that the Russian army has entered the settlement of Konstantinovka. These reports come from reliable Russian OSINT sources that base their information on videos and on-the-ground sources. We are waiting for footage of objective control from the settlement. Also, the Russian army advanced from the south near Alexander Shultin, and from there the push toward the city continues slowly. Another area where the Russian army has made progress is the South Donetsk direction. From the village of Novogergievka, it is reported that the Russian Vostok grouping has taken control of this settlement today. And that is all for the Frontline update. Now we move on to today's political agenda. The White House has announced that Vladimir Putin and Zelensky are allegedly ready for direct negotiations, and preparations for their meeting are already underway. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that both Vladimir Putin and Zelensky had expressed agreement to sit at the negotiating table. Preparations for the meeting are ongoing, and the US is discussing with both Ukraine and Russia a number of possible locations for the talks, the White House stated. For a good deal on Ukraine, both sides must remain a little dissatisfied, Leavitt added. It is reported that the next stage of the peace process will be overseen by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Special Envoy Steve Whitcomb. Western media write that during his conversation with Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin proposed holding a meeting with Zelensky in Moscow. As we understand, this was a counter to the West's proposal to hold it in Europe. Zelensky categorically refused, which means the location would have to be neutral. The only question is whether the meeting will happen at all. If yes, then when? For now, there is not even a hint of a date. If it happens, most likely, as before, it would be in the UAE, or China, or Kazakhstan, or even India, possibly Belarus, reports the Telegram channel Legitimny. Our sources doubt that Putin will fly to Europe, which Moscow sees as instigators in the confrontation. The source explained that traveling into the territory of the globalists would be dangerous, a trap with hundreds of possible provocations. This means a neutral territory will be chosen. Yermak's strategy is to drag out time as much as possible now and later derail the negotiation track. On Bankova Street, they are convinced that the Kremlin will refuse talks in the Putin-Zelensky format. This is exactly the factor that the head of the presidential office and European partners want to use as leverage on Trump. At his meeting with Trump, Zelensky did not explicitly reject the idea of a territorial exchange. However, Donald Trump stated that Kyiv must make concessions to resolve the conflict. Vladimir Zelensky has to show flexibility, Trump said. He also noted that Ukraine's accession to NATO has always been a taboo for the Russians, long before Vladimir Putin. The US president clearly defined the outlines of yesterday's talks. Now we await Moscow's position. Results of the Washington meeting, Trump is pressing Zelensky and the Europeans toward a peace agreement. The main outcome of the Washington talks is that Trump pushed through the launch of a real negotiation track with Moscow, based on the agreement in Alaska, reports the Telegram channel Resident. Thus, the concept of ceasefire first, then negotiations, is officially dead. Zelensky agreed to the position that there must first be an agreement, and only then a ceasefire. Until then, hostilities continue. This means that any pause is now impossible without a final deal. Even Europe was forced to back down, though Macron and Scholz tried to push for ceasefire talks. The territorial issue has also been removed from the red zone. Zelensky did not say no to the proposal regarding the concession of Donetsk region. He refers to constitutional difficulties, but is already speaking about some form of exchange, and is ready to personally discuss it with Putin. This is a rollback from earlier rhetoric, which means Kyiv de facto allows for territorial concessions. The discussion of security guarantees continues, but now in a format without NATO. Zelensky is asking for $100 billion worth of weapons as compensation, but that is not an immediate issue. The main point is that the idea of NATO membership and the deployment of Western troops has been postponed, and even Rutte acknowledges this. For Moscow, this is the main achievement. What's next? Trump is launching preparations for a meeting between Zelensky and Putin. First bilateral, then trilateral with his own participation. However, if Kyiv does not accept the Alaska terms, the meeting between Putin and Zelensky may not happen. Thus, Trump has started implementing a peace settlement plan, and he has already managed to shift Kyiv. Now the key issue is agreement on territories. If this case does not move forward in the coming days, the process will hit a deadlock. And if the front collapses, and this is already happening in the Pokrovsk direction, pressure on Zelensky will multiply. Ukraine cannot become a NATO member, and Russia cannot be defeated, declared the Slovak Prime Minister. The conflict cannot be resolved militarily, and a nuclear power, which Russia undoubtedly is, cannot be defeated, said Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico after an online meeting with European leaders, where the results of the Trump talks were discussed. Fico added that the basic condition for ending hostilities should be recognition of Ukraine's impossibility of joining NATO. I can only express regret that in the EU we had to wait for Donald Trump to show us the path to peace, the Prime Minister noted. He criticized the proposal to purchase $100 billion worth of US weapons for Ukraine, calling it a bad joke. Even in my wildest dreams, I cannot imagine Slovakia buying weapons from the United States and then sending them to Ukraine for free, Fico said. He also added that he is skeptical about supporting further sanctions against Russia. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán also made his statements. He said the strategy of isolating Russia has failed. World War III is postponed. Orbán's key points from the online EU summit, it was confirmed that the risk of a Third World War can be reduced only through a Trump-Putin meeting. It was confirmed that the strategy of isolation has failed, that there is no military solution to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and that only diplomacy can resolve it. Ukraine's EU membership does not mean security guarantees, so linking membership to security guarantees is unnecessary and dangerous. Orbán also stated that Hungary welcomes the steps taken within the framework of Trump-Putin negotiations. If you watched until the end, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, give a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos and see you soon.